On behalf of the whole board, thank you for being here. And I'll turn it over to Alon, fellow board member, very good friend. He is the executive director of digital marketing at Baxter, and I think knows this story well. So it's going to be a great lead from Alon with Richard taking us through everything. So over to you, bud.
All right. Thank you, Dakota. And can you verify that you're seeing my screen?
You're good.
All right. We always have to verify that as we start out, right? Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Let me just say a couple of words of introduction for our speaker today. We'll be hearing from Richard Marritt, who has been the CMO of Hillrom for the past 4 years, and has really led the company through an incredible transformation journey when we think about the rebrand that we're going to talk about, and a strong just marketing function strategy supporting a growth strategy and focus of the company, but also through a very challenging time when we think about how companies have had to react to COVID-19, especially as a healthcare company in the early days of the pandemic, that really caused us to take a look at how we want to show up, both for our own customers and in the world in general. So it's been an incredible run of years here as the CMO so far, and I think Richard will be able to tell us about that. Richard is one of those CMOs that's got a real broad base of experience and can sometimes almost look like a COO or a chief strategy officer. And that's rooted in his experience, and all of the things he's done. Early in his career, Richard was in sales and business development, working on go-to-market strategies and really focused on business and results, close to the business and really walking in the shoes of sales and in our go-to-market function. He's also been a marketing leader and worked specifically on business strategy. He later was a general manager in charge of the renal business at Baxter. So, think of someone who's a CMO that has really walked in the shoes of a top-line business leader. And after that role, he took over as the chief marketing officer of Welch Allyn at the time, which was, prior to the rebrand, really viewed as a separate brand and a large business within the Hillrom family and the Hillrom enterprise, and then became the CMO of all of Hillrom as we embarked on this rebrand journey that we're going to talk about. So I'm looking forward to you hearing about the story. It's been exciting for me to be a part of it personally. And then the one thing I'll add also about Richard is he's got a real passion for architecture. He lives in a historical lives and helps preserve a historical home designed by Frank Lloyd Wright here in Chicago. And he's also a proud Canadian and has a second home in Cambridge, Ontario, and is really active in the community there as well. So with that, Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alon. And, I think it's important to start by saying this isn't really a story about me or a story about something that myself or my team did. It's a story about, 10,000 very talented people. And when you start to think about a transformation, it's absolutely not something that one person can do or one person can lead. It really takes a village. And so it was something I'm really representing a story of the hard work and passion and ingenuity of many other people. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear. So let me set the stage of kind of where we were in sort of the late 2018 and the late fall as we were looking around. This was obviously pre-COVID. I use a joke that we used to use, the only time we used the term socially distant was to describe my brother. So these are all sort of new things where, this was a different world. And Hillrom had really grown very significantly as a company through some very transformational acquisitions. So we had bought a number of different companies, Lico, Volt, Welch Allyn, probably the most significant one, Trump Medical. These were companies that were doing amazing things. For example, if I look at Welch Allyn, we had a business to diagnose using a remote monitoring a diabetic retinopathy, the primary reason for blindness in adults in the United States. Really interesting technology. We were the only company that had an integration of our surgical table to the Da Vinci robot, thinking about advanced surgical treatment and surgical procedures. And if you think of even Hillrom, and you probably would think about a hospital bed if you thought about Hillrom, we have technology that actually is embedded in the smart bed to be able to sense somebody's heart rate and respiration rate continuously with them not even knowing it, just being there and not even touching their body. So it's an incredible kind of technology and a lot of acquisitions, but frankly, we had such a strong presence about our hospital beds in the history. And you think about this history, Hillrom started in 1929. Welsh Allen was founded in 1915. So this is a company, these are companies with just this tremendous long history and really strong brands, really strong brands around quality, around trust, around legacy, but they were also ones that didn't represent where we wanted to go in terms of our digital presence, our connected care strategy, our smart strategy, our data and how we use data. Those were things that were really not in the framework when you said, you know, the word Hillrom. And I think you can imagine with this many different brands, many people didn't even realize, for example, that Welsh Allen was part of Hillrom. The story that brought that to mind when I was leading the marketing team in Welsh Allen, I was sitting down and we were talking to a physician who was a very key thought leader for Hillrom. And they basically said, well, why are you here? Why would you have somebody from a separate company come into a Hillrom advisory meeting? And this person who had been working for Hillrom in a very in-depth way still didn't realize that Welsh Allen was actually part of Hillrom. And I think what happened, to be honest, was we did all these acquisitions. We knew that these brands were very valuable. We were nervous about making any changes. And in fact, you know, we had a number of different agencies come in and look at things, and a number of people suggested we should just start from scratch, kind of like a, you know, Advantis or creating like a pharma brand new name and starting from scratch. And what that did was it kind of froze the company when it came to branding. So the good news is we kept moving along in terms of our technology, in terms of our innovation, but we weren't really effectively telling the story about our innovation. So we were in a situation where our reality didn't reflect what we actually were talking about outside of our organization, outside of our company. And you can imagine from a digital perspective, you know, we have 6 or 7 major brands. We're in, you know, 130 markets. We had 260, I think, Alon, websites out there of various levels of quality and sort of rigor in terms of updating and keeping them robust. So we were really not well set up to really make a shift to a digital marketing approach or a more active approach. It was very traditional in what we wanted to do. But I think what made this, you know, probably the key to a success, there was an incredible amount of readiness to change. Although there was nervousness, and you can imagine a lot of emotion around a number of these brands, there was also this sense that we could do a lot better and we wanted to do better. So there was a really kind of a team that was ripe for change. So if you want to move to the next slide, you know, I think it's really important to really base things on data. And, you know, I think of this, you know, it's wonderful that people have an emotional attachment to a brand. I'd much rather, you know, as a marketer, I'd rather deal with somebody with a very strong emotion, even if it's a negative emotion, than I do with something that is, you know, absolutely flat. But really making data-driven decisions. So we looked at a number of surveys, really tried to look at this both internationally, so getting a perspective of where things were the same and where things were different between the US and other markets. But we were really judging all of our brands and saying, you know, are they brands that really represent a company? Can they be larger than just a specific product? Are there certain qualities that are extremely difficult to build if we started something new? What is the level of awareness of these different brands? And is it a significant part of our business, practically speaking, that we would actually, you know, rally around it? And what we ended up with, and not surprising, is we ended up with 2 of our brands that were really exceptionally strong, Hillrom and Welsh Allyn. And Welsh Allyn, you can imagine, almost if you go to a physician office, at the wall of a physician office, you'll see an ophthalmoscope and otoscope, and you'll see Welsh Allyn on the wall. It is one of the first products, first devices that a physician learns to use in their medical training. So it's a brand that is really important and really critical. Yet at the same time, we know that, but we also want to bring Hillrom into that discussion and into that in an effective way. So that's sort of where we were. And so we kind of laid out, at that time, 3 very, broad strategic options. And, and these will, for the folks who are, really steeped in brand, these won't be a surprise to anybody. One was sort of going down the model of the house of brands, similar to J&J, United Technologies, this idea that we would really have separate businesses, and you think about something like Welsh Allyn, where a lot of the business was in the physician office outside of the acute care hospital. Perhaps we could have something that, Welsh Allyn is the brand outside of the acute care hospital and Hillrom's the brand in the acute care hospital. We looked at the hybrid solution, and we had kind of, even in a really, frankly, half-assed way, gone there a little bit and said, Welsh Allyn, a Hillrom company or something like that. But it was kludgy and it was not well executed. And then you go down to the master brand strategy, where you really are talking about one brand. And it's interesting, in the medical device world, very different than pharma, you generally are not investing in the product names nearly the way you are, say, in a pharma market, where you'd be putting a lot of energy on what somebody's actually writing, the name of the prescription of the medication. Most of the time, people would refer to this as a Welsh Allyn monitor, a Hillrom bed. So the brand, the company brand, actually becomes really important, because it's what the customers are actually using to describe your product, versus the name, where we all love our names of our products. But in fact, if you test it, you'll find that we just don't spend in the medical device world the level that you would need to really get the level of brand recognition of the name of the product. So those were our 3 options. Not surprisingly, we ended up in a situation where we moved towards the master brand. But what we did was really keep Welsh Allyn as a very strong product brand. We didn't want to lose that value. We wanted to make sure that the Welsh Allyn ophthalmoscope, the Welsh Allyn Connects monitor, those products had the Welsh Allyn name there. We knew that there was a significant amount of our business that came from people just ordering what they already bought before. We didn't want to disturb that sort of automatic kind of ordering, that automatic piece, by changing and eliminating a name. So what we did was we shifted it from being a company name to a product name. And it was very interesting, because that really took a lot of the challenge that we had from a team perspective, and got people much more comfortable to really embrace Hillrom. They knew they weren't losing the Welsh Allyn in some way, shape, or form, but it was really celebrating the history. And in fact, we rewrote, I'll say, our corporate history to talk about the company as Hillrom starting in 1915. And we talked about that company history really starting with the Welsh Allyn history. So integrating a story that really brought Welsh Allyn to the fore while being part of Hillrom. And I think that, I would say, one of the things that I observed, and when I started and I came to Hillrom, I started with the Welsh Allyn business, as Alon mentioned. I would have said, if somebody asked me where I worked, I would say, oh, I work for Welsh Allyn. Who do I work for? I work for Welsh Allyn. Even though I was fully aware and understood the corporate relationship between Welsh Allyn and Hillrom, I still would have said, I work for Welsh Allyn. And that was one of the goals that we had as well, was really to give this sense that we are all employees of Hillrom. And you may be working with the Welsh Allyn products and the Welsh Allyn ophthalmoscope, but you work for Hillrom as a company. So, I think it's because this is kind of a marketing discussion, I'll spend a little bit of time on kind of what we kind of looked at from a creative perspective. And this is all done just to give you a sense in the space of kind of a month and a half to 2 months. So after talking about needing to do something for many years, we really said at the end of 2018, we need to move. And so these were all discussions that really gained energy in a very quick way. And we had a lot of discussion around, do we change our logo or not? And for folks who have gone through this, you know, there's a lot of fear around doing this. There's a lot of cost and concerns that people have. Do we change our logo, or do we just, you know, are we throwing away something that really is strong? So there were kind of three directions. We worked with a company called Profit, did a terrific job for us, really doing through three different options. You know, option one was actually embracing the logo that we have. Option two was tweaking it a bit. And option three was really changing pretty significantly what our visual identity was. And I'm going to show you a few of the ones that we didn't choose, just because I actually thought it was a terrific job. And what they did was really figure out a way of taking our logo, which we all kind of agreed was, you know, had been there for a long time. We needed to refresh in some way, and they really embraced it. And just flip through, you know, really quickly. They kind of, we like to say they embraced the hyphen and really brought it forward. If you just go through the different examples here. And we got to see it in a different way that we might be able to use. But if you go back just for a second there, Alon, interestingly, what we discovered as well, just if it's really important to have somebody who's a company historian, we discovered that the Hillrom, or noticed that the Hillrom logo without the pill was actually the logo before the you know, 15 years or 20 years ago before. It was the exact same logo. They just put the little round blue pill on it at one point to refresh the logo. So this would have actually brought us back to a logo we had 20 years before. So it is good to have sometimes in the room somebody who's gone through that history. So why did we choose the make the leap to the new logo? And it was, you know, really important for us from a name perspective. We had decided to keep the name. We knew that it was a trusted brand, but we also knew that it was so associated with hospital beds that we needed to do something, both in terms of the visual identity and even the word Hillrom. By creating it into one word, taking the hyphen out, we really wanted to stop the thinking that somebody had, because people knew Hillrom, they trusted Hillrom, but they kind of had closed their mind to what Hillrom did. They already had a bias. They already had a perception of who Hillrom was, a position in their head of who we were. And we really wanted to interrupt that thought process. So the decision to change the logo, go to this digital, you know, dots and dashes and ones and zeros, was very thoughtful. It wasn't a question of, you know, we're just a little tired, we'd like to have something new and looking a little different. It really was very intentional with the goal to have people say, okay, I know Hillrom, well, maybe I don't. Maybe I need to look at something else about Hillrom. And our digital campaigns and everything around it were all really based on that idea that there's something new and something different that's happening here. It's still the qualities, you know, to build out trust, to build out that sense of reliability, that sense that you're a partner that's going to be with you. You know, that takes years to build that level of trust that you have. You don't want to throw that out. That has huge value. But at the same time, you want people to think differently about your company. So that was a really important decision, and it kind of let us go down the road, and you can kind of see an example of how that works with the Welsh Allen becoming the product name, and then Hillrom becoming the corporate name. So let me just show you a little bit about our introduction. So no, maybe before I go there, one of the things that was really helped make this successful was some groundwork for launch. So before we actually had launched the new brand, before we started to talk about the new Hillrom, you know, our head of communications, Howard Koresh, was very effective in getting some key media, earned media around our story. We knew that this idea of a story of a company that was a hospital bed company, and that basically this digital, we got a digital upgrade at that time, the connected care component really was an interesting story. So we actually started this in, I think this was, if I remember correctly, kind of December of 2019, just before we launched the new brand. Internally, this story that we really hooked as part of the piece of I thought, there's a reason to believe why Hillrom is different than it was in the past. So this was a really powerful, it was I think a first page article. It was 2 pages long, really went into a lot of detail. Had a great discussion with our new CEO at the time, who had started about 6 months before. So it was a really powerful tool, both for our investors and for our customers, to really base this off of. And with that, I'll let you share just a little bit of one of the introduction videos that we had.
Connection. It's the core of compassion and communication. So imagine if you could advance connections and expand them to the heart of healthcare. Integrate the medical technology you depend on to deliver the right care at the right moment. The doors would open for earlier diagnosis, safer, more precise surgery, and accelerated patient recovery. We are not imagining, we are doing. We are the new Hillrom, uniting your most trusted brands and innovating more digital solutions with one simple goal: enhancing outcomes for patients and caregivers. Everywhere there is care, we are there, providing intelligent, more connected technology for doctors' offices, hospitals, and home. From smarter diagnostic and screening tools, to safer and more integrated surgical workflows, to insight-guided actions and simpler care team communications, to making effective care at home possible. We believe the right connections and innovations in the hands of those who heal can help turn healthcare into human care. Hillrom, advancing connected care.
So one of the things that we were really focused in on was how to make this more than just an update to the logo, more than just some really nice words. And as you can imagine, I talked a little bit about how diversified we were. We had multiple companies, but within each of those companies, we had multiple product lines. And we knew we didn't want to speak about the company in the terms of the old company names. We didn't really want to speak of it in the terms of our internal structures of our frontline care business and our patient support services business. How to talk about our business and get to something that's really meaningful. We ended up really organizing all of our messaging around 5 focus areas. And these focus areas, we did a lot of testing around what were the messages, what were the problems that we can really uniquely solve. And it didn't have to be a single product in that. It could be a selection of solutions or products that came together as a solution. And we ended up with these 5 areas, one of which I talked about diabetic retinopathy, enabling earlier diagnosis and treatment, accelerating patient recovery, getting people out of the hospital faster, simplifying clinical communication, optimizing surgical efficiency and safety, and then shifting care closer to home. And in each one of these, we could go very quickly into something that was a very strong proof point and a detailed example of what we were doing. And really, frankly, there's not a lot of patience for just a lot of fluffy words. And you're actually sitting down and presenting to you have a chance to present to the CEO of a large health system. You're wanting to talk about their problems and what we can do to solve them. And you want to get to something pretty tangible very quickly. But at the same way, you want to bring it up to the overall message, which we ended up being advancing connected care. And of anything that surprised me in this process was how strong those 3 words ended up becoming for the company. They really became a rallying cry for what the new Hillrom was. It was something that customers understood. It was simple. It wasn't particularly complex. And interestingly, it wasn't something that 8 other healthcare companies were all saying. They were talking about connected care in one way or the other, but this was something that really was challenging the view of who Hillrom was, highly meaningful to our customers, and simple and easy to remember. And so we really ended up throughout our messaging and kind of pivoting. We had a lot of, I'd say, more complex messages, and we started just to keep going back to advancing connected care and then getting into the meat of one of these focus areas on what we were actually doing. So there was, when we were thinking about the content that we were generating and developing, those content were very meaningful and very kind of not fluffy, I guess would be, I don't know what the opposite of fluffy is, unfluffy or influffy, but it was an important part of making this real and really getting people excited about it. So not surprisingly, you know, there's a lot to do when you decide to rebrand. This was just a little bit of a view of one of the high level project plans. We had the option of getting an external company to do project management or an internal company to lead the project, an internal person. We chose an internal person, incredibly strong, a woman named Luann Morin, who had an incredible successful career in Hillrom and Welsh Allen, and did an amazing job. And I think having that internal person who was the project manager really helped to move this much faster than if we had outsourced it, to be honest. I think that, you know, we definitely had a lot of partners that really supported this, but bringing it together and taking accountability and responsibility for the project was really critical. I would say that with the exception of probably some of the product rebranding, and maybe the website, some of the websites, most everything actually moved faster than we imagined. We could actually get them, you know, when we started to do this, this was a 3-year project that we had outlined. I would say really active management was probably a year to a year and a half. The websites were definitely the longest, tent pole that we had to deal with in the organization and moving them forward, but it was certainly something that really moved quickly. And maybe just to give a few examples of this implementation, you know, we actually we felt like we couldn't afford a just general brand campaign that we would have, that we really needed to use every single opportunity we had to generate leads, to actually have a really clear call to action. So we actually organized it around the 5 focus areas. We called it Rolling Thunder. And so we had 2 to 3 months where we were focusing on accelerating patient recovery. And we had a whole set of content and campaigns around accelerating patient recovery. We absolutely, this is, we'll talk in a minute about lessons learned. We needed to change. These took longer than we had expected. I think when I first said it to Alon, it was like, every 2 months, we'll do one of these campaigns and we'll be done in, less than a year. And it took us longer. And in fact, what we found is the shelf life of the campaigns was much longer than what we had originally done. We got into COVID in the middle of these as well. So we had to sort of pause and think about what did we need to do that was more meaningful directly to what caregivers were facing with COVID. And so we actually added another kind of Rolling Thunder campaign within this and paused what we were doing to make it more relevant, and then got back to it when things had calmed down a little bit. Not that they really have ever calmed down. But I think the other piece that really made this exciting for me was that everybody, it wasn't just a corporate brand where the corporate group, the small little team was pushing things forward. This was something that the design, the brand was clear, but had a lot of flexibility. And so the product teams really got behind it. They really started to create new materials. They got excited about it, and they brought it to life. I mean, in the end, you can only go so far if you really want meaningful content. And the product teams absolutely really generated some amazing new content and amazing new messages that were much more detailed, that really brought the brand to life and made it real, versus, again, just some really nice words that we might talk about on our website. Again, also, this is all digital, so it was also an opportunity for us to really build out our digital capabilities, our campaigns, our B2B marketing in a digital space, build out a digital sales team or virtual sales team, where we had more of a traditional field sales team, and adding to that. Also, we saw this around the world. So you saw people really taking the brand forward in other countries, in China, in Latin America, and really doing, keeping that idea of a clear brand And you could see that this was part of Hillrom, yet it was really customized and localized to what was meaningful in that local country. Again, really bringing that to life. So if I look at kind of the results here, there are a few things. Clearly this idea of inspired employees, people got really excited about advancing connected care. They saw themselves as part of Hillrom faster than I would have expected, in fact. And coming from, I think, coming from the Welsh Allen business, which had a very proud history in itself, that was a big deal to, moving the signs, going the signs outside that facility in Skaneateles, New York, from Welsh Allen, which had been since 1915, to Hillrom was a major change, but really was generally embraced. We absolutely lowered the collaboration barriers. We knew that we had a lot of shared customers between our different companies, different brands. We wanted to share, we had been talking about different structural ways that we could collaborate more effectively. In fact, sometimes it wasn't a structure that we needed to change. It was just the fact that we now talked about ourselves as one company opened up those opportunities to collaborate. I think we really shifted what marketing was. I don't think people thought of Hillrom as a marketing company, and we wanted to make sure that people really felt like a career as a marketer is something really exciting and really fun in Hillrom. And, obviously shifting perception. And I'm not, naive enough to think that everybody has a new perception of who Hillrom is. It takes a long time to change perception. I always like the line that says, a university's reputation is based on what they did 20 years ago. And so it definitely takes time, but you have these little wins that are really exciting. And we did an acquisition at the beginning of 2021 of a company called Bardi Diagnostics. It was in Seattle, amazing company, amazing team. And the headline was health tech giant Hillrom to acquire Seattle startup. So suddenly even the words that people were using that a media, we didn't plant that wasn't off of our news release. This is what they did. And they used kind of terms that changed the perception of who Hillrom was. And these are the things that were just really important to get that external validation. So this is just an example of, I think a more recent video that was done about 6 months ago in a campaign that we had about connected care moments. And I think you can see just how, from a company that was very feature and product focused, how we kind of have brought this forward.
A nurse's greatest fear is having a patient take a turn for the worse, especially if it could have been prevented. That's where Hillrom comes in. Their range of connected care solutions work together to continuously monitor and analyze patient data. When a patient becomes at risk,
Hi, Mrs. Roberts.
the system alerts us immediately.
All right, what's going on?
I'm feeling short of breath.
Okay, let's get you some oxygen. I'm gonna start with your blood pressure. Okay, and I'm gonna take your temperature. I'm gonna go ahead and call your doctor. Hi, Dr. Larson.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
We can respond earlier, connect with physicians immediately, and help our patients recover sooner.
Okay, based on your vitals, we think you have an infection, which could lead to sepsis. So we're going to take some more blood samples, order some additional labs, and put you on an antibiotic. And don't worry, we'll take good care of you.
Thank you. I'd like to update my wife. Do you think you could explain all this to her?
Sure.
Hey, how are you doing, honey?
My nurse Carrie's gonna actually tell you about it.
Hi there. Yeah, your wife.
Having a patient take a turn will always be a fear. But when care teams are connected, we can identify risk sooner and respond faster.
And I think one of the things when I saw that, I'll go back to for a second here, before I get there, that made me proud about that was developed, that wasn't a corporate campaign. That was something that was done by one of the business units, yet they included just by the nature, many products that were outside of the business that they were directly responsible for. So it actually, even though it wasn't something corporate we were trying to do, it really followed the story around accelerating patient recovery and earlier diagnosis and treatment. It featured products across our whole portfolio, all done in a way that didn't take a lot of effort. It just happened because kind of the brand and the whole positioning really pulled it together. So I was really proud of the team in pulling that together. And we've got terrific response from that, much more so than, again, probably what we expected. So in terms of results, I'm going to have to show this stock price chart, but, we were down, if you look at where we were when we launched the brand and where we were at the acquisition of Baxter, our stock price had actually moved from just under $80 to $156. So we almost doubled the value of the company. Now, that wasn't simply, a brand, but the brand was a really important part as we look at the kind of the next journey of Hillrom as being part of Baxter. This, connected care story was a major part of the reason that there was a sense of how much of a fit there was between the two companies, and a major part of the value driver around it. It also, if we looked at measures around what is the number, our sales coming from new products and the increase in sales coming from new products, the increase of sales and the growth rate of our sales of connected care products versus unconnected care products. Those were all really important measures that changed the perception, not only the perception of our customers, but also the perception of our investors on who Hillrom was. Our peer companies changed in terms of who we were being talked about against. We were now being talked about against other companies that had a whole different profile than what the traditional Hillrom had. So it was really an incredible story. And I think it's just the starting point of now what we can do as part of a larger company with Baxter, and extremely excited about that. And I know Alon has a new role in Baxter as well, and as do I right now. And it's really an exciting time. And, the whole area of bringing the brand together and changing or moving the perception, the continuous movement of the perception of the company is a really good adventure. And I think, regardless of where we are in terms of the brand in the end, these qualities and these capabilities we built, I think, are going to hold us in good stead. So with that, I think I'm going to open it up for some questions. But maybe before I do that, just give you a few of my kind of learnings and observations. And Alon, please jump in. You were a major part of this, you and your team as well. I think pragmatism has to be an incredibly important part of any kind of major brand campaign. I think you can, we had decided to create something called a brand council, where materials would go and be looked at. And I was very nervous about this. And the team, because I thought of it as a little bit of this corporate, you're working in a business and you're needing to get something done, and then somebody's coming to you and telling you that the color isn't exactly right or something like that. But in fact, what really happened was there was a lot of focus on finding a solution versus enforcing a rule. So as opposed to saying you're kind of the brand police, it was really about helping people tell the story more effectively. And sometimes you have to be pragmatic. What's really the most important that's going to be meaningful? Which products are the most important to get rebranded? You can't do everything at once. So being very pragmatic, I think, is really important. I think the other piece is, going and pushing, beyond just kind of superficial taglines. I look at, when I was putting together these slides, I went back to a few of the decks that we had when we were looking at, some of our messaging. And I look at some of the other ones that we looked at, and they didn't tell that story. They didn't grab you. And so pushing something that beyond what you could, what everybody can claim, and what just sounds like a nice word, innovation in motion, or, something that's just a bunch of words, really going beyond it and testing it is really important. I mentioned about, we were very successful in recruiting a project leader and project manager who was highly credible in the organization, deep in the organization, that was going to have the biggest change. So finding that person that really could influence, kind of informally influence the adoption was critical. Just as a funny aside, I came from more of a general management background. I knew what Pantone colors were, but I don't think I had any sense of how important they were. And I learned that when somebody said something was digitally native color, that sounded really cool, but it just really meant that it was incredibly difficult to produce consistently anywhere else. So I had some learnings on my side in terms of some of the intricacies of design that I probably didn't understand and wish I had going into it. I think challenging the budget, one of the things that frankly kept us from not doing this was this perception that this was going to be a massive cost. And in fact, it wasn't. I can't share exactly what the costs are, but I can tell you that it was less than half of what the kind of the minimum budget that we were told from an expert perspective. So, while it's definitely an investment, it's not. You can do it in such a way that it doesn't become impossible to manage. And it really, I think in a lot of organizations, there's such a fear that this is going to be so expensive that you don't do anything. And I think there are ways to definitely minimize, or at the very least, really leverage a brand campaign that is also a demand generation campaign or something that you're already doing. And then I'd say the final learning from my perspective was probably not underestimating the IT infrastructure piece of this as we built out and obviously consolidated all of those hundreds of websites that we had and built a common platform. And we obviously did that in a real pivot to COVID and being more digitally oriented. I think that was a bigger project than we ever kind of originally imagined, and one that I think has come out in a good place in the end, but definitely was something that was a bigger lift than what we had originally expected. So with that, I'd love to open up to any questions that anybody has.
I'll start us off, and if you, if any of you want to go ahead and raise your hand or put something in the chat, we can manage it that way. So Richard, just to get us started with the Q&A, and by the way, at the very end of the Q&A here, we don't actually have that much time left. We do have one more video, which is kind of a behind the scenes, more of a fun video. If you'd like to see it, just just before we close the session here. Richard, you talked a little bit about the speed of adoption, which was surprising. I think you and I have talked often about how, in a way, this rebrand really captured the imagination and energized areas and functions that normally you wouldn't associate very closely with marketing, right? Do you have some thoughts or reflections on how this rebrand affected other areas of the business, like strategy, R&D, and IT, which you mentioned earlier?
Right. Yeah, no, I think from a strategy point of view, connected care became far more than a tagline. So it became a core part of our strategy. So as we started to look at business development opportunities, as we started to look at how we funded our R&D, we really started to use connected care as a core and measured how much would this really drive our connected care strategy? How much would this really contribute to the perception of who we are? And I think of, Volt as an example of a key acquisition that we did. And it's a mobile communications platform that really simplifies the way that nurses and caregivers can reach and talk to each other. We saw that as fundamental to that connected care story. So it helped us really focus where we wanted to invest, both organically and externally.
One question that we have coming in on the chat here, which is something I know I was thinking about too, is how did you go about getting your data really on brand strength? Was it customer interviews, quantitative? Like, what was some of the process and methodology there?
Yeah. So we did 2 or 3 things. We had a core sort of we'll call it baseline brand strategy, which was quantitative, about 800 participants. And that was the one I kind of mentioned. There were about 6 countries that we did that in. And that was really the base to give us a sense of kind of what was the brand awareness of the multiple brands that we had and what was going to be acceptable. I would say we then did more smaller focus group and qualitative testing of different messages. When we made the decision, for example, of the 3 directions, we actually went out and did testing in 5 or 6 countries on what would be the acceptance of, something with a Hillrom name and a, Welsh Allen vital signs monitor. So I would say we did one baseline. you know, I would have loved, I think, at the end of 3 years to have done that exact same study. We did the acquisition instead, so we didn't get a chance to do that second kind of baseline to see how things actually changed. But we did do, in terms of some of our regular market research we were doing for new products, we have a number of questions about, usually about brand, the corporate brand, and we saw the impact on some of those as well.
I would add that from a tactic perspective, one of the Rolling Thunder campaigns incorporated a mobile advertising tactic where we did a pre-roll survey and then a post-roll survey, you know, in different instances to test the the audience, the target audience's unaided, you know, association with what we were advertising in our brand name, and there was definitely a lift there. We could see that the advertising was effective, but at the same time, I would add, Richard, that it also showed us how far we still had to go. I mean, it's not an overnight thing. You can't put $1 million in the market and expect that you know, that in 3 months you're going to have changed everybody's mind and shifted,
Yep.
you know, thinking immediately. So it takes time and repeated effort.
Yeah. And one thing we did measure really closely is we looked at our web piece, looking at our web visits, the length of time, how much they're engaging, where they're engaging. And we had already a consolidated view across the 150 sites. And now as we move forward, we saw very significant increases in our web traffic, in our web engagement, and then in leads. I mean, frankly, I don't have anything to compare it to because we didn't measure leads previously. And so having a much more rigorous view of how people were engaging with us, what were the leads, what was happening, what was the close rate, those things didn't even really exist as measures, and they came out of kind of some of our upgrades. It really wasn't truly just the brand, but it was part of being able to put that infrastructure in to be much more effective in our measurement.
Another question here from the chat, and maybe add some personal context around it too, or you know, something I was thinking about is it seems like a lot of the brand work kind of evolved into other like really valuable things too. You talked about cooperation across all the different business units and maybe even really it becoming a catalyst to define the purpose more too. And so the question was like, what was some of the feedback that you had at the executive level, the C-suite board, you know, like throughout the process?
Yeah. So I think, you know, throughout the process, there was a sense that we have, in most cases, shared customers. We absolutely were committed that we wanted to create greater connections between our different businesses. That was something that everybody desired and we had been talking about. I think there was probably in the board, maybe about half the board that really saw our ability to improve our storytelling, improve how we could tell our story, that what we were telling people and what we were disconnected. I would say the other half of the board was a little more skeptical and show me that you know, this is really going to be valuable. I'm not sure I really want to invest here. I could invest in something else. And so you really had to prove the value of pulling it together. But once people saw it, it was very quick that everybody, you know, very few people didn't get on board. They were really excited about it because they saw how it would help their business. So if I'm a business leader, I actually see that this is helping me tell my story more consistently, that I'm not having to go and reinvent kind of some of the materials. I can put it into something that already exists and it's stronger. The actual content that my local team is generating in a country or in a business is stronger because of it. And that was really clear by the end.
Dakota, I think we have time for maybe one more question, unless you think there are two that are going to be quick ones. And I think you're seeing the questions, I'm not.
I don't have anything teed up right now. You led into some of the other things that were being asked.
Okay. Well, that means we covered a lot of good stuff. But Richard, maybe then one closing question that I had thought about asking you beforehand here, and then we'll show that video that we talked about. So for others considering, a major rebrand, whether it's a small company or a large company, if you think about the two major phases of it, the planning phase and the execution phase, are there any significant barriers that maybe surprised you or that you'd call out, or challenges that people should anticipate because, you know, most companies don't do this very often, as costly as it is and as big a change as it is. What would you highlight as barriers that people should think about and anticipate prior to?
Yep. I think, you know, definitely the people piece of it. If, again, even in a small company, if people are your ambassadors or your brand, so if they see themselves in the brand, then they can get excited about it and they can just enable this as part of their work versus it being a corporate or kind of a push. It becomes something that really is embedded. So I think the more that you can actually have people see themselves, you know, we were really integrated into our diversity and inclusion campaigns as part of this as well. If you can see yourself in these campaigns, it becomes a lot more exciting and interesting to go that extra mile to bring your brand in. So that would be my thing, is that don't ignore the people side. You know, with all the getting the trucks all done and getting the websites done and the technology done, in the end, it'll be the people and them being, and all of our people being excited about it's going to make the difference.
And we literally called them brand ambassadors. It was a group of people that that helped carry the message and get people excited, but also inform people about what we were doing, right? All right, I know we're close to the top of the hour. I think we're going to roll the behind the scenes for fun video, and then Dakota will close us. If you leave while the video is going, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. In a story I think that I'm certainly proud of, and I know Richard is as well. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we've done studies of customers from all 50 states, 10 provinces, 13 territories, and 33 Latin American countries. It's really time for us to decide about our brand. Are you ready? We keep the logo as is.
You've got to be kidding me. How much did we pay for this?
Or we could put the pill on all the other names. Take 2 Welsh Allens and call me in the morning. I'm sensing some frustration right now. You know, as my Canadian friends like to say, it's time to put the moose on the table. There's a critical decision to be made about our brand identity. If we go the wrong way, there's no way back. The hyphen. Do we embrace it? Do we lose it? Together, we'll look at the facts and we'll decide. What do I think? I'm staying neutral. I've only been here 2 weeks. I'm not putting my career on the line for a line.
The hyphen? Really? I flew back from Masters Club for this.
We're going to go around the room. Everybody will get to state your case. Then we're going to decide. Alana, what do you think?
I say it goes. Let's be honest. The hyphen is the mosquito of punctuation. Annoying.
But what happened to honoring tradition? Who are we to take away a piece of punctuation with so much history?
Lose it.
I hate typing that hyphen in our emails.
I bet there are thousands of orders for beds lost in cyberspace because the customer didn't type a hyphen when they sent us a message.
No, we can't lose the hyphen. It's going to create too much of work. We'd have to change everything. Our emails, our signage, our packaging, our hats, and our other hats.
So Richard, what are you thinking?
I'm pro.
Oh, good. Wait, pro what? Pro keeping it or losing it?
Yes. Okay, let's take a vote.
Wait, we can't vote without PJ, Andreas, and John. Are you guys still on the line?
Hey guys, this is Andreas. The audio's been cutting in and out. What's the debate here?
Hey, it's PJ here. It's about the hyphen. We gotta keep the hyphen.
As the president and CEO of this company, I say we kill it.
Exactly what I said. Gotta kill it.
I think the news has leaked.
We're getting opinions from everybody, except the individual who matters the most. So, hyphen, what do you want?
I think we made the right decision.
Well, with that, Dakota, if you
That was awesome.
close us out.
Superhuman touch to bring it all home for a serious business. So thank you to you both. I think this was, it's great to see the comments coming in the chat still of congrats and wonderful story and inspiration and all of that. So you guys are both making our entire B2B marketing community that much better for sharing this kind of stuff. So very much appreciated. We will share the recording of this session out with everybody. As I mentioned before, mark your calendars for March 24th, coming up in a few weeks. We're going to have a really fantastic presentation on innovation and the importance that marketing plays in driving kind of culture development across innovation. And then also on April 6th, the War for Talent with Spencer Stewart and Richard Sanderson. So stay tuned, lots coming from us, and ideas continue to be welcomed at any time. So thanks again, Richard, Alon, and everybody have a fantastic week.